do these town halls roughly once a month at different locations. Back in April, we had one in Salinas. Next month, we're having one out in Pajaro. And like to have it kind of open and free for taking questions as possible. Obviously, if this one, I figured there might be a few questions on the Vistra Fire. So we brought a few people in that we normally wouldn't, from the health department, housing community development, and a few places around. And I don't like to do a whole lot of talking here at the beginning, but we like just kind of get the questions and really have it really directed from what you folks are interested in. And we try the best way we can to answer them. If we can't answer a particular question on something, I have to take your name down and we'll get back with you with information when we can onto it. I got a few more guests than usual here, so I'm going to kind of introduce everybody, and then if any of them in particular want to go through and and say something, they're very much welcome to. So we'll start down here on the left with.
I apologize for switching our order.
I'll jump all around.
Yeah, that's Kelsey down there.
Yeah.
No, I'm Kelsey Skillen. I'm the Director of Emergency Management at Monterey County. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to hear from you and to receive questions and feedback.
Lindsay?
Yeah, I'm Lindsay Rabel. I'm the Assistant Director for Public Works, Facilities and Parks.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Rick Encarnacion, Director of Environmental Health. We're your health inspectors for the county. We do everything from restaurants, public swimming pools, gas stations, your landfills, water, septics, wastewater, the whole gamut.
Good evening, Joel Mendoza, Fire Chief, North County Fire. And I'm Craig Spencer, the Director of Housing and Community Development for Monterey County. We're planning, building, stormwater, code enforcement, and all of the fun stuff. So, looking forward to the comments, and hopefully I'll be able to answer some questions.
He never gets any questions, so please ask him a question. And because we have a few people, actually, we have a few people here in the front. Marty, you want to?
So, I'm Marty Flag, I'm the Assistant Director for Environmental Health.
Hey, Jess Cortez, the Chief of North County, in charge of fire protection.
Good evening, Chris Better. I'm the Field Operations Lieutenant at the Monterey CPD office.
Good evening, Commander Joseph Banuelos. I'm the commander for all of North County, from Gonzales, all of North. For patrol people.
And I missed the bold print here right on top of mine. It says announce that we have a interpretation service over here. So if anybody does need Spanish interpretation service, gentleman over there will give you a hand onto that. And I do want to just point out a couple other people with my staff, and I don't even see where Marilyn is. Marilyn here? There, oh, you're right. What again? Marilyn Vieira, Chief of Staff, and Vanessa Azevedo. So with that, we have till about 7, so I don't really want to hold up any questions anybody might have, but if you would like to, I'd like to try to keep it as kind of organized as possible. If you could, let's see, we don't have microphones today, and I guess we probably don't need any in here, so I'm trying to think as I guess we'll just do it by raising hands, and I'll try to keep track of who it is, and if I catch you out of line, it's because I made a mistake. But I'll keep your hand up, I'll make sure we get to everybody onto things. I would ask that you really stick to a question and then let somebody else go. Maybe you can have a follow-up sometime if it's similar, but I don't want somebody just sitting here for 10 minutes popping out 10 questions and kind of taking away from everybody else. So with that, do we have anybody? Ooh, there we go.
Hi, I'm Cindy Vistal, and I actually live here in Los Angeles. Just a question, has Vistra powered back up again?
I should really answer that pretty much. Vistra has not powered up. Their facilities are down. When you do see that's some people refer to as smoke, but it's steam coming from their gas facility out there. But they have no plans to power up at this point. I you know, and hopefully they'll give us plenty of forewarning when they do. Well,
Thank you.
have anybody else? Yeah, yes.
Hi, I'm Cheryl. I have a quick question. I saw that the PG Tesla was going back up on First, but it went back down. Did they contact county? What happened with that? Did you go and inspect what they were talking about with the plant that was out? And
Yeah,
Would
they,
you like me to answer that?
yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, hi, it's nice to see you again. They did not, or sorry, they did attempt to turn back on the batteries, on the PG&E side on June 1st. Upon noticing the coolant leak, they did, end or shut off their, power supply. And my understanding is that they did report it to the CPUC, which they're required to do. They did also notify the county, I wanna say on, Monday, so 2 days after the fact.
And I do just want to point out that I know you're saying the fire is going to be the big issue everybody wants to talk about, but in the town halls, it's really any issue regarding the county is welcome. Roads to sheriff's department to whatever it may be.
Tsunami
Code-
planning.
Yeah, planning particularly.
Community plan.
Community plan. I thought the gentleman in the back there, you had your hand up? No, you're fine, okay. And you have anybody else? Yes, sir.
For planning, I guess in a way, it's, I try not to ramble too much. I moved here in like 2001, and it seemed like it was kind of exciting, things were happening in Los Landing. We, as a community, saw plans for downtown sidewalks, bike paths, a path through the slough and stuff like that. And now it just seems like buildings are becoming abandoned, businesses can't succeed here. I've heard it's nearly impossible to get a water connection if there's, for the lots downtown. And now we have the new language and permits related to climate change. So what do you think's like the future of Moss Landing? It's almost like the county's sort of abandoning Moss Landing, or what do you think's happening here in the future? Because it seems like since I moved here, it's just kind of decaying, kind of in a way, when you look at downtown.
Before you jump in, I realized I forgot James Cochran is he around. We have somebody professional services to do? Yeah, you are, James. Okay, very good. In case you're talking about water connections, I think you would be the one who would answer.
We don't do water. Part of Sunny Mesa does water in Moss Landing. We do sewer in Moss Landing.
Thanks for the clarification.
So we are working on a Moss Landing community plan update.
When I came to the meeting for the community plan update, it was mostly about all the new restrictions.
Well,
Like,
there's, yeah,
your old land's gonna be considered hazardous, new building permits and regulations. It's like, who's gonna wanna do anything here?
so I think the last meeting that was out here on the community plan had to do with a grant that we received from the Coastal Commission. Because in the Moss Landing Community Plan update, we had to address sea level rise, which is a threat to this community. So it was a focus of a portion of the community plan. But I think to answer your original question, the vision for Moss Landing should be part of that plan. How do you want to grow, and where do you see that growth occurring? We are addressing sewer limitations and water within it. We do have a lot of guardrails put on us by the Coastal Commission and other state and regulatory requirements. But the vision for Moss Landing has been in the past mostly antique stores. You have the Moss Landing Inn and the fishing and harbor area. You have and you have opportunity for some potential growth on the other side of Highway 1 and within the community. So trying to figure out how that looks in the future and then removing constraints to making that happen is the first step in moving in the direction of how to essentially get some investment and, you know, over time move towards what Moss Landing vision is for the community. So I'd ask you, what is the vision for Moss Landing? How can the county help?
Well,
Moss
you
Landing.
mentioned the restrictions, I mean, I've heard, like, I went to the planning department on an unrelated issue, and I just asked somebody there, I go, so what about these empty lots in Moss Landing? There's all these lots down there, and they were saying, oh, you're never gonna get water down there. Like, you could never build anything down there, because you can't get a water connection. And so it's kind of like, I don't know if it's like the county didn't want to see anything happen, you know, at least in the planning. It's kind of like, it's sort of weird. This Moss Landing's a great place. It's like, has such great potential for being a vibrant little spot, but the water issues, the sewer issues, the hazardous, all that stuff that was at the last meeting that was relating to climate change and building restrictions and the hazard designation, it's just like it's gonna kill it here. I don't wanna see Moss Landing die.
No, so
It's like
So
a
you
great
should-
place.
there is ability to connect to water through Pajaro San Mesa. They've done some system improvements, they drilled a well out by the old middle school. Our public water system, that serves this area. And so there is the infrastructure in place to connect to water,
What
so.
about the ability to get a permit to do it? Like at the county?
Yeah, that's what we're here for. If there's something that is going to be built, a change of use, we're here to work with you on getting that permitted. It can be done. I don't know, you can apply for anything. If you wanna build a skyscraper in Moss Landing, you could apply for that, but it doesn't mean it'll be approved that way. But there's lots of different uses within different land use designations that are allowed. And in certain cases, like with the old school district offices, we worked with the new tenants there, it's a solar business. They, through the Surplus Lands Act, purchased that property, wanted to use it as a business. It was zoned for public, quasi-public, school-type uses. We worked with them on getting that permitted so that they could move in and operate in that facility. So there's always a path, and there are some bureaucracy and hurdles, mostly because you're in the coastal zone here. And there is the Coastal Act, which means that the Coastal Commission implements the Coastal Act, and through our certified local coastal plans gives us local permitting authority. The Moss Landing Community Plan is part of that certified coastal plan. So what we say in that plan is what we can do moving forward. So it is an important effort to make sure that the community gets involved in the visioning for what we want to see Moss Landing look like. We can work on how the infrastructure constraints can be addressed and how to remove those regulatory barriers to getting things done that advance the vision for the community.
We've seen lots of neat visions for like 25 years in meetings. We've seen great diagrams, plans, fantastic, but nothing really happening. Yes.
Yeah, I was wanting to ask, now I'm talking about the Vistra, the fire. So there's a lot of, I know that on your survey that there was a lot of information about the complaints about the lack of the alert system. And people like myself who had signed up and been getting county-wide alerts on my phone for for tsunamis, for things going on in Monterey, for big surf fires. And then that night, we didn't get anything. And then, but my friend in Monterey did. And so she was calling me and keeping me alerted, and then we were calling our neighbors, and we didn't get an official alert, except for our outdated landline. We heard it ringing in the other room until 11 o'clock that night about staying indoors. We were staying indoors, we were keeping the door shut. Of course, we have a view of the fire.
Yeah.
So it was very easy to film it and watch it.
Were you in an evacuation order zone?
We were right next to it, we were in the advisory zone.
Yeah.
We were within about a half mile.
Okay, but you received the health advisory at like 11? Okay.
So meanwhile, we did not get any alerts. Like I said, people outside of our area were getting alerts, maybe the folks in Moss Landing were, I don't know, but, and then, so we all complained and gave feedback about that, but then on February 18th, when it reignited, and we could smell and see the plume, and yet again, and so we never got an alert. And so when we called the next morning, we were told that only the people that were in the plume, quote unquote, were getting alerts. And so they studied so in other words, the alert system, the people were saying, oh, well, the wind is going towards the ocean. Only Moss Landing residents were getting the alerts. When of course, that's not at all what happened. The wind shifted a few seconds later. And it all came like it did the first time back in through like our area row-ups. And so, you know, we kept our windows and doors shut, but then the next day we didn't. And it was very, very snowy, and we had to shut things back up. We never got an alert. So is there going to be people who signed up for the alerts? There shouldn't be a selective process edited. It should be everybody gets an alert, because the winds are going to shift and change.
Well, thank you so much for your feedback, and I appreciate you filling out the survey and communicating it just now, as well as I presume previously. I will say that we are constantly reevaluating how we utilize the system. It is typically a fine line between over-communication and under-communication. In the same breath of people saying that they did not receive enough messaging, we also had people complaining that they received too many messaging. And so we do try to balance that communication with the intent that people should have what they need to make an informed decision about their life and property. And so I fully appreciate the predicament that you're in, being outside the evacuation order zone. That night, the primary responsibility of fire, law, and our office, who administers the emergency alert system at the request of Incident Command, which is the Sheriff's Office in North County Fire Protection District. The priority was immediate life safety, which was the evacuation orders, and then followed with the health directive at 11 p.m. And so we are reevaluating that communication strategy in collaboration with Vistra and both PG&E, and looking at how we can effectively reduce risk to life and property through a radius rather than through the pre-identified zones is the first thing, and the extent to which we communicate beyond the immediate evacuation area. In the interim, I recommend going into your alert profile and adding the Moss Landing Power Plant as an additional address for which you get alerts as kind of a workaround in the interim. So that you're getting any emergency alert that's issued for the Moss Landing zone specifically. But having heard that, we do recognize that something needs to change, and we're evaluating all of the different avenues for doing so effectively.
So my understanding is from the February fire and the flare up that happened out then, because my office had quite a few calls from people that were concerned. That my understanding is we now have in the process that we will send out an alert to all cell phones within.
A wireless emergency alert, is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
that's what, when I spoke to Sergeant Del Rosa, the CO officer, county administrative officer, the Sony was telling me that was what we're switching to. So we would have, particularly, it isn't the case in all emergencies, but because this one is so different and unusual in so many ways. It's not like a flood or a normal fire, if there is such thing as a normal fire, I would think, a county fire here is probably one of the, likely to say normal than fire into there, but, maybe this was an industrial accident with obviously a lot of chemicals involved and potential wind changes, that the smoke is a lot more concerning than, normal fire smoke, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, that is correct. So we are reevaluating our policies on utilizing what's called the wireless emergency alert system, which does not require registration and essentially utilizes the cell phone towers in the area to triangulate all cell phones within that within that area. We find that there's a lot of bleed over, so even if we intend to only alert Moss Landing, like, we're likely going to be communicating with like Morgan Hill in the city of Monterey. So we're very particular about when we utilize the wireless emergency alert system, but I do think in this particular instance, it is a useful tool. I will also say that it should not be relied upon as the only means for receiving emergency alerts. So if you haven't done so, please still go in and register your information in alertmontereycounty.org. And update any landlines, or if you've gotten rid of your landline and that's the only communication method that's been provided, please remove that and update it with a cell phone number. If you don't have your phone number, we can't always call you. There's also the possibility of cell phone towers being down, so if you do have a landline, please make sure that's registered. And the other thing is follow us on social media. There's no silver bullet to communications. There's always going to be the potential for a technological failure, a system failure, a human error. The fact that you were asleep and your cell phone is on silent. So registering for every possible means of communication is the most effective way to ensure that you're getting up-to-date information. So thank you for your feedback.
You had a question.
How about I wait until we exhausted the topic of the fire? And then we'll talk about other issues, I assume, from that point.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what was your asking?
He wants to forego his comments about
Well,
Mustang.
we could rather,
Yeah, well, you talk about anything you want.
right, well, I'm gonna wait till after the fire.
Oh, I got you. Well, you never know, it might,
This breaks up the conversation tonight.
for sure, that, keep in mind. Yes, go ahead. Yes, I'll go to you.
I am gonna switch the subject, because the fire's gonna be ongoing, but there's a couple of things that do you want me to just do one question at a time?
You get a little follow-up, depends how,
Okay.
how it relates.
So, roads, I'm Mary Larkin, Moss Landing Heights, so the roads, Moss Landing Road is in horrible condition, and we have no place to safely walk without having to walk in a muddy trench during the winter time. What is going to be done about that? I am under the understanding that, yeah, we've been planning this for 25 years. I'm not ready to go down to the local, pavement supply place and buy some blacktop and just slap it down on the side of the road. Because every time I walk out there, I feel like my life is in danger. People come off the Highway 1, they're still going highway speed, and you have to jump into the ditch to avoid it. So what are we doing about that? Also, the Dolan Road Highway 1 intersection is a disaster. Anybody who commutes knows what fun it is to get across the highway and try to go north or south, depending on which time of the day it is. What are we doing about that intersection? And my third question is, what's going to be done about Dolan Road? Dolan Road is a POS, if you ask me. I actually drive down to Castroville and go out 156 to get to Highway 101 to avoid Dolan Road. Those are my three big questions.
That falls on me, so I'll do my best to answer. Again, my name is.
I'm gonna jump in, because all I'm doing is seconding Mary, really.
Okay.
Okay, I've lived here since 1980, I've been fishing out here since '69. Does the county feel any responsibility for surface transportation for unincorporated areas? I mean, I've seen old folks, young folks, drunk folks toddling along in a ditch on either side of the road, trying to get from the post office to downtown. It's the fourth generation of supervisors that we bitched about it. And, I said, how much can it cost to build a 12-foot wide asphalt bike trail? on flat ground for 1,000 yards, a half a mile. Okay, that's it. You've heard this all before, every supervisor we've been here, it's really this.
I'll let Lindsay go then, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for adding to that, yeah, appreciate that, and certainly understand, the condition of the road, and we understand that. The county has $1.5 billion worth of deferred maintenance, so we recognize that. We are tracking it, we are assessing it annually, okay? I just wanna say that we recognize that the community of Moss Landing is part of that. It is in the, as regarding Dolan Road, it is in the 5-year CIP. It is tentatively, I'm gonna say that, with that caveat, for 2030, okay? So that's what we see.
How many people have died? I mean, have you driven all
I'm sorry,
this?
yeah, you start finish, yes, thanks. You have more you want to say?
Yeah, no, I understand the emotion behind that. There's a lot of roads in Monmouth County, and we get that. And we do have to assess it based on safety, need, use. It's a very complex, we understand it, but I understand in your community, this is a priority, and we hear that, and it is in our document, and looking forward, we hear you. But sidewalks.
Golden Highway has been paid 3 times, we pay the same taxes as they do. So remember
Yeah,
that,
I'm
theirs
sorry, we
are
had a couple
really
of people
nice.
ahead of you, I'll be,
Just a quick
well, but we'll still respond.
That's it, so there, one of the things I just want one of you guys to do one of these days, is drive from Dolan Road to the Sleeps Road overpass, and you will see no less than 12 shrines for people that have died on this highway. And I'm almost ready to like, I don't know if you remember 101 in the 70s, the Highway 101 was like this road. They called it Blood Alley.
Yes. The San Miguel County, yes, I grew up here, I'm very.
Yeah, and so you know what I'm talking
I do,
about.
the left turn champ, yes. Yes, I hear you. I do remember that. Those are all significant and profound. I understand, yes, we all had people that we lost in those. We understand that. We're all affected by it.
So just to kind of jump in a little bit on the roads there too, and
Yeah.
you know, once you deal with Highway 1, we're dealing with the state and Caltrans too, which is, it's, you know, they're the ones that are really the main ones onto that. You know, Caltrans had something that came up about, I can't remember exactly what it was a while back there, on Dolan Road, with the interchanges there on some potential changes, but with them, you're looking even further down the line, and part of the issue we deal with here is with, is the coastal commission too. I like to see 4 lanes out on that road. Caltrans sort of has a policy to the state, they don't want to add those lanes on. I'm hoping we can make an exception out of this one. I know when we look at the community plan, I want to make it really clear in there that we're still advocating for 4 lanes onto that. Part of a problem that we have dealt with, I'm going to refer this back to what was my father, who served on several commissions in 2000, and my experience of talking to him about why can't we get 4 lanes on Highway 1. At that point, the delay was really coming from the coastal commission, where staff, and my dad was a pretty straight talking person, so he's not exaggerating, but he was being told that time, this is 20 years ago, that the coastal commission staff was opposing a 4-lane road because it was scenic and they feel people should drive slow. And I'm looking, and that is, you know, that's what had been, we've kind of been fighting on the past. I don't know when that's ever gonna go to a 4-lane. We still gotta deal with the Dolan Road there, but it's gonna take some kind of an overpass. So it's gonna take major work being done on there. It's something to bring up periodically.
Highway 1 Scenic Pacifica, you have 4-lane highway going through Pacifica right along the beach. They're doing a double standard, Half Moon Bay, Cornell. I mean, every town except ours has improvements, and I just see, I'm so tired of hearing sirens and seeing car parts strewn across the highway. It's like, if places like out in Helena can get their road fixed, why can't we?
I totally agree, and because of climate change and concerns with that, there is some impetus now going ahead with that. You know, when it's going to be done, you know, I have no idea, well, some of us won't be here, I'm sure that, maybe most of us won't.
They keep fixing Highway 1 down Big Sur
Yeah.
slides into water every year, and they repave that.
You know,
So.
I would urge you to reach out to anybody you know in the state onto it, because that was really was onto them to a great degree. In terms of Moss Landing Road, yeah, I mean, I go by there, I got a post office box out there, it's bad condition. I think you were asking about a sidewalk onto there. What's the cost per foot for sidewalk now?
it will depend, I
Yeah.
don't have that down, but.
It's there's a few things that were big surprises for me when I became supervisor. And one of them was the absorbent this huge price of a sidewalk. And I go, this is millions of dollars in sidewalk work that would have to be put in right there. Now, you mentioned about,
Whose fault is that though?
why is that?
Who's choosing those contracts?
I don't know, ma'am, you know, we're trying to address individual questions here. You know, please be part of it. Sir, you mentioned a very good point about a bicycle lane out of that. Could you give me an idea of where you're thinking that would fit in? And like along, were you talking about along Moss Landing Road, or you talking about the highway?
Right by the cemetery, right along past Davies, you know. In fact, there's already a wide area right in front of the bar, their property already has a wide
Yeah.
area. We don't need anything special, we don't need curbs and things like that, all you need is some asphalt, they're all over the place, they put them in everywhere, an asphalt path, you know, big enough for baby strollers and bicycles and whatever, it's not that expensive, you know.
No, you're correct on that, so,
By the way, just to, I don't wanna let it slip by. High-speed four-lane highway here is not unanimous, okay? A lot of people bitterly opposed to that concept. You know, when you put a four-lane highway, I can think of a more appropriate one, about 3 miles inland. I think we all know that one, but, no, I don't think it's ought to be a four-lane highway. But,
okay. But the idea of the bicycle lane, I'll look into that one. I think it's a great idea on that. I know there were 2 hands up, a couple of you two there, now the gentleman in the back. Yeah, whichever one you wanna go first.
My name's Linda Martin. I've been a resident in Royal Oaks for over 30 years. My question relates to the fire. Shortly after the fire, there was information going around that the emergency plan for PG&E in case of a fire or similar emergency was not up to date, that they were in violation of some rules that had been put in place sometime recently. Similarly with Vistra, I'm just wondering, can you shed some light on that? Have the emergency plans been updated for both Vistra and PG&E? Does this sound familiar to you at all?
The emergency plans are pretty basic, but I'll let Elsie.
Yeah, so SB 38, I believe, was passed and went into effect in October 2023. And since then, actually, Vistra submitted an EAP employee model to the county prior to that legislation. That legislation came after the fact, and they started working on an EAP employee modeling at the request of the county. After the first incident in January 2021. And so we have a version of that. It does meet SBA 38 requirements, which if you've read has very little teeth in it, and basically says we'll have plan and we'll call 911 is the basic requirement of SB 38 and is somewhat insufficient. PG&E has submitted an EAP and has had an EAP. I don't remember when they created it, but it was submitted to North County Fire, and Chief Mendoza can confirm when they received it. We have requested that they submit the EAP for formal review with the county, which they have provided, and the county is going to review and provide comments. At this juncture, really all we can do is provide recommendations for how they can increase the efficacy of the EAPs that they have and their plume modeling. Frankly, I find both of their plume modeling insufficient. But as such, the limitations of SB 38 really kind of leave us hand-tied, but we are working to get a more up-to-date EAP and plume modeling for both sites.
So, if I understand it correctly, the requirements for an emergency plan are pretty weak. That basically anything they submit, they might take recommendations, but they might not. And so,
That is our interpretation, but that will not stop us for recommending the best practices that are known for emergency action plans for critical infrastructure.
on that note, adding to hers, I remember from the October pastoral, Brad Watson explained that the plume is just gonna hang over their little area like a little veil dome thing, which obviously didn't happen. So is that the model you're referring to?
No, so they did pre-disaster plume modeling, which accounts for different variables such as numbers of batteries under thermal runaway or conflagration, wind direction, fog density. And so we had requested a catastrophic incident scenario from Vistra in their plume modeling, and they provided what they felt was catastrophic, which we disagreed with. We have not seen updated plume modeling since we received that in 2022. And we would like to see updated models based on new variables that we will be proposing to both Vistra and PG.
And will that include all the testing sites compared?
The EAPs are not necessarily an after-action review of the Moss 300 incident that occurred this past January. They're more of a all hazards response to an incident at that facility. So, but you can find the data regarding the air monitoring on our website. Environmental Health has committed a significant amount of resources to making that data readily available in a consumable manner.
And it wasn't like, just to further explain, it wasn't like there was a violation of SB 38. So just to be clear, what we're trying to do right now is to review the plans, especially in light of the incident. We know what we kind of like want to look for in terms of an emergency action plan. And just to also clarify, any business that has chemicals, environmental health, we do what's called, there's a requirement for a hazardous materials business plan. Firefighters use it. It's basically an inventory of all their hazardous materials. If it reaches a certain threshold of a certain kind, they have to report it to the state. They have to have an inventory. They have to have who to call. They have to notify. Now batteries, right? Batteries are a little different. That's why the laws have to catch up. That's why there's this SB 38 that requires this emergency action plan. That's very similar to like the dam, right? There's an emergency action plan for the dam. There's emergency action plans for all the refrigeration plants out here because of the ammonia.
Yeah, I will say to Rick's point is things like ammonia, refineries, dams, those are well-known critical infrastructure, and the requirements for those EAPs have been very thoroughly vetted and outlined by the regulatory agencies such as the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and they have very robust and strict expectations for what has to be in the plan. The same cannot be said at present for lithium-ion battery energy storage systems. So until, as Rick had mentioned, the legislation catches up, the best that we can do at this juncture is to provide very strong recommendations about our expectations of what should be in the EAP.
Yes, sir.
So we understood that, PG&E opening back up again, you had requested that we not do that until we understood what caused the fire and what happened. And they did not listen to your recommendation and tried to start it already. What's the politics going forward? Do they have the ability to just bypass any local requests for control, or how are you feeling about that?
The CPUC, California Public Utility Commission, governs them, handles the safety issues with them. It's basically the case with pretty much anything with utilities. They're in a special class of regulations in the state. I use, I like to use this example. I always use Chief Mendoza as an example here that I encountered the first year I was in here, and to show you just how much they can ignore us. And I had somebody complain about the eucalyptus tree and getting some sparking, brushing against some PG&E power lines. Got in touch with Chief Mendoza about it. He says, well, we can talk to PG&E, but we can't require them to kill them because it's the state that really has control over that. And that's basically the situation we're at right now. But one advantage we have is this whole event has obviously generated a lot of publicity, and both Vistra and PG&E are kind of aware of their public image, and that's really the best we have. The more we keep attention on this and focused on it, it has some impact. But PG&E shut down voluntarily, even with this whole thing that happened and their facility getting soot and ash all over it. The state did not come in and say you have to shut down. They did it on their own, so they could turn on whenever they want. And they pretty much, the CPUC doesn't take much of a bite, frankly, and they probably have the power, but they don't. This gentleman here, I'll go to you now, and that's all.
Yeah, Supervisor Church, you are to be commended for calling the Moss Landing best disaster the 3 Mile Island event of the renewable power industry. 5 months later, how do you characterize it now?
Well, it's pretty much the same thing. Some people criticize me for that, but it's basically because people.
I'm commending you.
Yeah, thank you for that. A lot of people don't understand what really happened at 3 Mile Island. It was kind of a similar situation, and that there wasn't anybody who died immediately from any disaster onto it. It was an incident that caused the country to reevaluate the nuclear power, put in new safety protocols, and we're moving in that direction. And it's also it also looked at that point, 3 Mile Island. It had the same design as the one Rancho Seco up in Sacramento. It was shut down. It was considered to be an old design. It wasn't safe. Well, that's kind of what happened here. They were stacking these batteries up on top of each other's building. That's a design that they say is not safe anymore. So I think the comparison is still adequate, and glad it got some attention and get some people to think on things.
Should the best industry be shut down for a decade or two, like the nuclear industry was?
I think I've taken the position, and I'll stand by it, is that until the technology can catch up, and safety technology can catch up, I'm really concerned about the type of batteries that are being used, the lithium batteries, because there is not a way to put them out. When you have that many, I think it's concerned there are alternative ways of storing energy, from different kinds of batteries, sodium batteries, to actually going through and over in Kern County, there's a battery facility being developed over there. It's compressed air. It's actually going to supply electricity to homes over in Monterey County. They're building a cavern and have windmills. The windmills turn, they compress the air. As the electricity is heated, the air is released. The windmill turns, it sends out electricity. Ironically, you can have this industry go through, and if it feels like with what limited amount we can do at the local level, if we're obstructing it too much, they can utilize state law, which allows them to get a permit in 270 days, which is totally bypass the local officials. They get a permit. And yet, this facility over that I'm referring to in Kern County using compressed air, it's getting delayed by state permits. So if there's a state really wants to go ahead, renewables and develop things, there's plenty of options out there, and they kind of need to level the playing field so it's equal for different funds. Now, you have a question?
Thank you for speaking directly to the technology PG&E and calling on the track record. Obviously, I did that and I appreciate it. My question to you is, if this battery storage facility did not exist, how would that affect the future plans that are on the table right now for development in Monterey County? Part one. Part two, how much does this facility provide electricity for places outside of Monterey County? And if so, what money came into the county as a result of that facility being placed here?
Well, I'm not sure I have the
That's
answer
your
for all
homework.
that.
No, that's your homework.
Okay, I mean, so what I know is that this facility is connected to San Jose and Arizona. So it does, it is connected through all of the PG&E infrastructure and the high power voltage lines that you can see along those roads, heading north mostly. I don't think that the existence of the batteries would affect development plans within the county.
I have a better question. Are there any data centers planned for Monterey County that we're aware of right now?
No, not that I'm aware of, no. And what was the other question?
My other question was how much money does having that facility placed here bring into Monterey County directly, either through sale or lease?
Yeah, I mean, I know they pay the county some property taxes. And I don't know that we get any other direct financial benefit.
But there will be, it's just like any other large business, property, property taxes do come in from them. Just to kind of touch upon a little bit, understanding the significance of that power grid right there. This, when that was PG&E's facility back in the 60s and 70s, it was a fossil fuel plant. They would burn, and I don't remember if it was winter or summer, they'd burn natural gas one, and then they'd do oil for the tankers that would be out there, as probably many of you recall, that would unload the oil. But that facility, at one point, was the second largest fossil fuel power facility in the world. It produced, it was a major source of power on the West Coast. At one time, it produced more electricity than all the power plants in LA. So the infrastructure there to send out that kind of electricity is what makes it attractive for the industry to come in here and why the state signs off on it in this area. You have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. It's regarding the battery fire. I'm really grateful that people with the Emergency Operation Command are here. My question has to do with the evacuation. I felt that the evacuation was lifted prematurely and didn't span a large enough area. And I was wondering what information was used to lift the evacuation, and was it ever reevaluated? And I ask about the reevaluation because on the morning of January 18th, that EPA air monitoring data was never made public, but there was records showing that that morning the PM reached 1.275 milligrams per meter cubed, which is triple the hazardous level. So what information was used for the evacuation, and was it ever reevaluated?
Chelsea and Chief of those, you're
I'll defer
two
to
that were involved.
North County Fire and Sheriff's Office.
So, yeah, great question. Obviously, we were working in unified command with the Sheriff's Office. When we initially asked the Department of Emergency Management to send out this alert for shelter in place, we talked about this earlier, that there's plume modeling that was provided to us, but and to speak and add to what Kelsey Scanlon was just talking about is, those plants that were given to us, they were for like one battery burning or one battery rack or with a module within a battery rack. And so, we planned for that. However, in this particular case, we had to defer back to something that we've never seen before. A battery fire like this, we've never seen at that scale. We've had the one at PG&E burn before. We erred on the side of caution. We had monitoring in place, but we saw fog coming in, and what we said is we're gonna reach out as far as we think is logical in order to keep the public safe. This was the same case. When this thing started, when we knew that it was burning uncontrollably, and that the systems that were designed to keep this thing in check were overridden, then we spoke to Kelsey along with the sheriff's office and said we need to put these, the evacuation order in. As far as when it was lifted, we relied on data, which was the monitoring that was being conducted. It was either an EPA contractor and the private company, CTEH, by Vistra. And so that's the only thing that we have to rely on is the data that's being collected. And, in conjunction with the Department of Emergency Management and, all agencies aware essentially, but the Sheriff's Office, we came to the conclusion that it was safe to lift that evacuation order at that point.
Chief Mendoza might also add, the reentry and repopulation process for any emergency, whether it be this event or wildfires or flooding, is a very much a collaborative effort between all first responder agencies that have a vested interest, responsibility, or critical infrastructure in the area. So generally speaking, we look at risk to life and property that may still persist in the area. We look at road conditions, bridge conditions, availability of utilities such as water, and the general livable conditions of the community prior to lifting evacuation orders. And we all have to come to consensus upon lifting those orders. If at any point in time an agency disagrees, we pause on the lifting of the order and have a conferral, again, later that day or the next day. So it is no singular agency that makes that decision, though the lawful order to evacuate is held by the Monterey County Sheriff's Office. They rarely take or make that decision alone to either enforce it or to lift it. They are a very collaborative agency with that respect. And so the lifting of an evacuation zone is constantly evaluated the second an evacuation order is actually issued. The Sheriff's Office, having worked with them for almost a decade now, is not interested in keeping people from their property longer than is absolutely necessary. And so they're constantly looking at the risk to life and safety and receiving information from subject matter experts regarding the threat to public health and safety. So having said that, as Chief Mendoza had mentioned, at that juncture, our understanding of the greatest threat to the community at that time was either conflagration, which we felt confident was still able to retain within the perimeter of the fence line, or potential hazardous materials in the form of a plume, or hazardous gases, which you've heard amply about over the last several months. During that time, none of the monitors indicated that there was a significant presence of hydrofluoric acid or gas that would have impacted residents or individuals more than was allowable by OSHA, I believe. And so that was ultimately the determining factor by all parties as to why the evacuation order should be lifted.
So the equipment that CTEH was using was insufficient because its limit of detection was 0.5 parts per million, while the MRL was 0.02 parts per million, and the OEHH 1 hour standard you guys were using was 0.293 parts per million. So why is CTEH allowed to use insufficient equipment that can only detect up to 0.5 parts per million if you're using a standard for 0.293?
CTEH was not the only agency conducting air monitoring at that juncture. It was also the US EPA and MBARD, and we received input from all three of those entities to make that informed decision.
So the EPA was using equipment that wasn't specific to HF. Can you guys talk about the difference in the limit of detection on that kind of equipment at all? I think it was like a SPF gas flex cassette.
I can't speak to US EPA equipment.
Part thing to realize onto this, I mean, Chief Mendoza said, well, we have never experienced anything but a single incident before. But actually, the fact is that, the world hasn't experienced an incident like this before. And there's no template, there's no guidelines, there's no manual to go by. We're writing that as we go through with this. And that's not very comforting, but it's the unfortunate fact of that. That's why I've got 4 hands up into here. I am You know what, I'm gonna go, before I go through this, I'm gonna go with the lady, you know, at the back of the, and.
The loud mouth?
You
The
should,
mouth?
yeah.
Passion,
go right ahead.
passion for community.
Yeah.
You recently released the results of the health survey. How do you plan to utilize those results?
It's from our Public Health Bureau. They're separate from the Environmental Health Bureau. But I can try to speak and try to explain on behalf of our health officer. So the survey was intended to gather information from, I'm sorry, what was this? It was to gather information, and I'm not too familiar with the exact questions that were asked, but how would we use it? Well, it would be used for planning purposes, to make more informed decisions as we, navigate through this recovery process. Myself, as a regulator of health code, maybe it would result in newer health codes. Like what Supervisor Church was mentioning, this is kind of like new ground. Myself, as a regulator of hazardous chemicals and materials, one of the constraints that we have is we're dealing with batteries. It's the same battery that's in your cell phone. It's the same batteries that are in Tesla cars. And batteries are basically considered a battery. They're not really regulated if they catch on fire. So maybe the survey would help us point to more monitoring, what other services we could provide. I think it's also to try to get a situational awareness of what was experienced for those who were traumatized by the event.
Do you plan to do another one? Is that something?
Yeah, usually these surveys.
A year or 6 months or?
Could be. I think in terms of like what the epidemiologists are staffing in our public health bureau. They would look at the study, they would try to maybe craft more questions that would help us point us in the right direction.
Before we go to more, Nancy, yes, or do you want a question? Nancy, do you have one?
Yeah, I mean, after all these months, it seems to me that it's very unlikely that these facilities are not going to continue, that Vistra will eventually start again, that PG&E will start again, and that because there's nobody to stop them, they've been able to get by all of this. In the meantime, knowing that these kinds of things, when this starts up again, any kind of flare-up can happen anytime. We've been told that, that's not an exaggeration. So we have woefully inadequate emergency plan. I mean, what we learned last time was a lot of people didn't leave because they had no place to go. And the only place that was allowed, that people were told to go was the community center in Castroville, which had no key. And I think 27 people went there. Most people wouldn't have gone there. Many people can't afford to go to hotels. There's no voucher system to ensure. And it seems to me that if these places are going to be allowed to continue the way they have without permits or anything, it should be on them to provide adequate voucher systems or some way of people to be able to evacuate. That was not possible. And many people just didn't because they didn't know where to go and they wouldn't be able to get back in. So there has to be something, there should be, we've written a letter to the Board of Supervisors about this plan and their answer was really inadequate. There doesn't sound like there is a plan. There's not a plan to deal with people with different languages. There's not a plan to deal with people with different income structures, where they're going to go or how they're going to get there, the transport system. All of that. It's a huge issue if you're going to be living under something that you know is going to catch fire again. And if that is going to be allowed, then you need to be able to pay for what it takes to take care of the community in this kind of situation.
So that's, your points out of there, and as we've addressed here, we're a little bit limited on what we can do in controlling utilities, but there are things that we can do in terms of monitoring and when we monitoring and hopefully some enforcement onto it. I'm planning on discussing with some of the people that are up here and over the next month, year or two, on some details on some things that we could try to do at the local level on monitoring. What you suggested is that maybe there needs to be some kind of a fund from these facilities for that it would be accessible in an emergency when it happens. I don't know if we can enforce it, how we can do it, but I think it's, being that both of these companies do feel that they wanna have a good PR presence.
They're doing a
and
great job of that.
That, it might, I made note of that point, that I'm gonna come forward with something and try to expand some ways that this county, can be more engaged here in the future. And exactly how that's gonna take shape, I don't know quite yet, but I hope to have something out
But
there.
in the meantime, they
I
can,
can speak to the sheltering.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
what?
I can speak to the sheltering
Okay.
element. So shelters are, typically a, congregate setting, meaning everyone shares a room together. Sometimes we break them up into men's, women's, family dormitories so that we're separating people appropriately based on, cultural expectations, and providing a limited degree of privacy within that setting. What that requires is a specific criteria within the structure. It has to be ADA compliant, it has to obviously have 4 walls and a roof, and there's a whole checklist for square footage. Having said that, we fully recognize that the Castroville Rec Center is insufficient for overnight sheltering. My challenge that I have, and I actually would receive recommendations quite readily, is that there are very few spaces in this area that can meet those expectations without placing the shelter so far away as to be almost inaccessible by the residents. And so Castroville is the closest place, otherwise it's Royal Oaks, or Prunedale, or Salinas, or Marina. And so in the future, we will not be using the Castroville Rec Center until such time that adequate heating or HVAC and electricity can be installed or upgraded. And so what that might mean in the interim is that people have to drive a little bit farther. We typically do offer free transportation through a contract between our office and Monterey Salinas Transit. Unfortunately, it does take some amount of time to establish and set up those routes that are outside of the normal bus routes. And doing so at night or at the end of the business day, which was the case for that particular incident, was very difficult, and then we essentially lifted them the next day. And so if an event is longer than 24 hours, we'll typically be able to set up that bus route faster. I think one of the things that we did learn absolutely is Vistra's willingness to provide monetary compensation directly to residents for overnight sheltering. I don't know, that's obviously not a reliable source of funds, and I don't know if it's feasible to expect that every time there's an emergency there. But it is, I think, something to consider if you're wondering whether or not you should evacuate. My third recommendation, which I'm sure you're frustrated with because it's what I put in the letter in our response, which is that if you don't plan on going to a government shelter and you can't afford a hotel, I highly recommend you reaching out to your friends and family network to identify an overnight stay setup if you are evacuated. Because those are the solutions that I have at this juncture, and they seem to be somewhat inadequate for your expectations, but they are meeting the health and safety code standard.
Can I say something? So, real quick, for the local health inspector and the folks that do regulations for hazardous materials, I'm part of a group of my counterparts with the other jurisdictions. It's called the California Conference of Directors of Environmental Health. Lithium-ion batteries is a big topic. Other jurisdictions who have experienced this. So I'm part of an ad hoc committee that's looking into what kind of regulations and rules that we can do at the local level. We're also delegates of the state. The whole scheme of hazardous materials management and regulation is a state program, which we, as your environmental health specialists, are delegated to. In some of the jurisdictions, it's the firefighters. But I'm part of a committee, and our experience here is definitely going to be part of that input for those new regulations.
But in the meantime, those things are gonna start up again, and there's still no plan. And that seems,
Sorry, who's gonna start up again?
well, they will eventually, and even PG&E could start up before
Well,
long.
so Moss Landing, I believe, has to get approval from environmental health to start up again.
They have, like I'm saying, I'm your local regulator, Now, I'm gonna try as much as I can,
Okay,
right? And I've been trying to say like, hey, we have regulations, they have a health permit. Now, it's true, the state does have, they regulate the energy side, but we regulate the chemicals. But again, batteries and the regulations for batteries have to catch up with what, right now, it's just considered a fire. But in terms of like managing and regulating materials, the laws have to catch up.
but it's a fire that can't be put out by water.
Yeah.
Okay, so, go with Mari, then go with Libby, start to the best, and then go there.
First off, and I should have started by saying, thank you so much Supervisor Church for everything you've done for our community through this disaster. You are reaching way far beyond what I think any supervisor has ever done in any other part of the county. And your staff is wonderful and accessible, and I just want to start with that, because you hear a lot of complaints, and we have a lot of complaints, and they're legitimate, but we really need to give you credit each and every time first, so that you know that we appreciate it as you try to put out these fires for us. So now I'm gonna complain. And I really wanna, be able to link what, the woman in the green, Sharon, and others are talking about in relating to the evacuation, and going back to, and what you were saying about, that we can regulate chemicals. So, I just wanna use us as an example, not because we're the whiners that deserve all the attention, but we have been documenting, and we happen to be right in a spot on the edge of Elkhorn Road area that got the biggest hit of the plume. It's documented, we have the test. Had we known, so it's the one time in my life I really trusted the EPA and the authorities, because I was just so desperate to be able to open my windows and doors. We were not able to evacuate, we weren't even in evacuation zone a mile away. But we had a horse that just had surgery the day before. We knew that if we left, we would not be able to come back and heal back. So we did not leave. I wanted very much to leave. I was very sick. And so what happened was we stayed and we listened to the news and we heard our representatives telling us it was safe and that we could open up our windows and doors and the evacuation zone was lifted and the hydrochloric acid, EPA said it had burned up, there was nothing, we had nothing to worry about. Just get rid of debris like it's a fire. I mean, I stupidly believed it. And we opened up our windows and doors. There was a little bit of a warming trend right then. It was before the rains came. Our whole deck out there, which is where the plume hit us, was white. I didn't know that that was hazardous material. I thought it was like in other times when we had fire. Just fire like from the complex fire, when everybody had stuff all over their cars. Well, it had all the four metals heavily. And what I didn't know is not only is the outside of, and then the rains came, okay? Well, thank goodness, it is that, as Ivano Aiello from the Moss Landing Marine up here doing all the testing, showed that it's sinking. So dilution is the solution to pollution in this situation to a certain extent. It's not going away, but at least it's not on the top. Well, we didn't know, so all of the surrounding areas, including our deck and all the surrounding, we have 20 acres, got washed, but I had my windows open. We just had the inside of our house tested in the same manner for surface. And my neighbor on Elkhorn Road did, and then also my friend in Moss Landing. We have all 4 heavy metals in our homes. I'm having really bad eye problems. It's been persistent, and all my other symptoms have gone away, but the eye problems have gotten worse. I've seen 2 ophthalmologists. The first one said, yes, you definitely probably have got this from the contact dermatitis or whatever, from the 4 heavy metals, which are tested so heavy on your property. But I can't say that in your charts because I might get sued by Vistra. So it's not even can be documented for me. I've got another eye specialist now. I moved on, and my eyes are not, tonight's a little bit better night, but I now have 4 heavy metals in my house, in the kitchen cabinet, on top of the kitchen cabinet, and on the beam where we tested. Had we known to not open our windows and doors at least before the rains came, at least in inside of my home would have been a sanctuary instead of causing now 5 months of torment on my eyes. So this is why it all is linking in. And then my horse tested 800 times higher in cobalt and 600 times higher in manganese than is normal in his blood work, which I'm gonna share with Supervisor Church. And also I'm gonna share also my test wipe samples in our homes, in my home. And so this is, I just wanted to provide a on-the-ground example of why these questions about evacuations and air quality and what Sharon was talking about, we have to have better science. Because that's actually a responsibility, of course, as you know, to protect the health and safety of your residents. That's the county's responsibility. And so, reevaluating, like the alert systems and stuff, it's gotta be more than that. It has to happen right now. These things are gonna be fired up. It did get fired up on January 1st, June 1st. I'm sorry, I've taken over the whole evening, so I apologize.
No, that's okay. Actually, thank you very much for telling your truth of your story, and I appreciate hearing it.
I have all the data, all the tests and labs.
Yeah, and there's also, what you read in the newspaper is that the county is starting to do some soil testing and stuff related to the Vistra fire. You're 5 months late. 5 months late and 10 inches of rain. You are not able to represent what really happened in the real world at the time when the fire happened. And so you're missing the information that's required to make intelligent choices. And that's what really is what concerns me. We have the vet bills, we have the bills and test results, we have our own blood tests and everything else that we basically went out and took care of it ourselves because there's no help in the county. And I don't expect much help from you guys at all because you're way late to the game. I would have expected environmental health to be out there the day after around the power plant and really looking at what is being presented, for example, by Yellow and his measurement techniques and his findings. His findings clearly showed that the plume modeling was absolutely inadequate. And from the engineering point of view, and I'm an engineer, models are used at a time when you don't know better. We know better now. And we as citizens here in North Monroe County, we have, within a short period of time, developed 125 test sites that we reported. And those numbers clearly show how significant it was and how much larger the plume actually was compared to the modeling. So I don't think you need plume modeling anymore. I think you need to go to the real world and look at what's out there and take the information that we as citizens provide seriously.
I do just want to be clear, we recognize that the plume modeling and the soil sampling and air monitoring are two very different things. And yes, you are correct, modeling is for when you don't know. And so, obviously, it's important to not evaluate any one of those things in a vacuum or in a silo, and to look at it from the bigger picture and what each of those data samples means in relation to each other. And that is absolutely what the Public Health Department is doing. And as Rick has mentioned, there are just so many things that none of us could have known. The largest fire prior to this was in an industrial area that had 0 residential addresses nearby. They didn't need to do community sampling. They didn't do evacuation orders. There's really no precedent except for this for us to learn from prior to this event. We have been asking questions since the first incident at Vistra. We've been pressuring them for information, pressuring them for models for things that we don't know, which were clearly inadequate. And so I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, you may hear what you're saying, but you're not seeing, you're hearing it. Meaning, you didn't go out the next day after and started a task force that evaluates a once-in-a-lifetime event.
So I know the lady in the scarf factory is going to be first.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Glenn, for writing me back. I've written to John Addis and John Mayer and helping EPA California Attorney General, you're the only person that wrote me back, so I appreciate that. I live in Royal Oaks on Strawberry and, Hidden Valley Road, and I've never received any notifications. I went on to the notification website so many times after people told me that this fire is happening down in my neighborhood. Never got, they said, oh, you already signed up, and then I tried to re-sign up, and I didn't, something was wrong. I was in the zone that was marked, that was hazardous, but not evacuated, which was very confusing. In fact, everything on the website was very confusing. And then every day, I couldn't even figure out when the fire stopped burning, right? Like, it was so confusing. Is it burning or not burning again? When did it stop? Did it ever stop? I mean, there was no clear information. Now where I live, we've had our soil tested, in very, very high levels, and the map plume, it's like some of the highest on the map, even though we never got an order evacuated or any kind of warning. Meanwhile, now after the fact, now that the soil has been tested, it's still no warning on, this is happening in the neighborhood, there is soil, and perhaps you should do something about vegetables you're growing in the garden. Meanwhile, I wonder what's happening with toxic ash that's just sitting out in the air right now, and if people who go into the site have to wear PPE, then how is it you just walk around this neighborhood? I mean, wouldn't it just be going around in the air? Shouldn't it be sealed off, tented while we're waiting for it to be cleaned up? I mean, this has not gone away just because the fire stuff is still there, leaking into our atmosphere and being burned into the ground. We've been to doctors. The doctors have been given a note that I saw published from Monterey County that says all of the levels were tested under the EPA limits, so everyone should be fine. So my doctors aren't taking me seriously. My husband was in the ER a couple of weeks ago. His heart rate was in the 30s. We couldn't figure out why. Internal bleeding. Never figured out why. On Monday, I was at urgent care. My face was twitching while I was having a stroke. Manganese poisoning has to do with facial muscles and many years, and other symptoms I've had. So I'm being tested for that now, even though several doctors I went to said there was no testing for this. So perhaps putting out more information about what metals were released and what doctors could do to help patients rather than a note saying that patients are fine, they haven't been exposed. It feels like there's some misinformation there. Potentially misinformation, not testing for some of the PFAS or other chemicals that were burning at the time of the fire, and just, as you mentioned earlier, specifically testing for things that would pass the test rather than looking for the things that were going on. Now we're in a Superfund site, is that correct?
It is not a Superfund site.
Not yet.
No, it is not a Superfund site, and under the circular agreement, it will not be a Superfund site. The US EPA is operating under their authority as a Superfund entity under CERCLA, but it is not technically a Superfund site, is what US EPA has told us.
How is that different?
From what I understand, a Superfund site is a site that can't really be cleaned up. Like some of the, I think the Firestone facility, some of the landfills, for example, around, this is something that is viewed by the EPA, can be cleaned up, and everything that was there be removed.
The Superfund authorities are also under CERCLA, I apologize what I meant to say. So they're leveraging their authorities under CERCLA, and I don't have the full acronym for you at this immediate moment. But they're not, and do not plan to designate it as a Superfund site. They fully anticipate that the site can be remediated.
When did it pass to remove it?
Sorry, I want to kind of catch, I know, I know Wes and Kim and the gentleman here in the cap, you had your hand up earlier too, not just right, so I want to get forward, I'll go to you.
I do just want to understand, is there going to be, is it tented, how is it being detected right now, this toxic site that has ash and heavy metals going on?
The last time I was within the Moss Landing Power Plant facility, I was within about a half mile of, maybe less, a quarter mile of the actual Moss 300 structure. post-fire, sorry, let me clarify. And they were not wearing PPE, and they did not request that I wear PPE during that time. And so my understanding is that the toxins are not emanating from the building, I'm not sure if that's the correct term. And their Vistra staff and PG&E staff were also not wearing full PPE.
The people inside the building are wearing Tyvek suits and
If
full
they're
respirators.
in the Moss 300 ash footprint, yes, absolutely, they do have to wear PPE. But in the surrounding vicinity, within the fence line, they are not wearing PPE.
I want to go to the lady here, who I missed a couple times there, sorry.
Based upon what a lot of us are sharing, that live in, and I live in Royal, I don't live in the immediate area in Los Angeles, that still is affected. What is appalling to me and is the lack of knowledge, just geographically moving away from the scene. I have very close friends in Pacaro, and I definitely want to know when you'll be there, to the community there. Because with my experience, personal experience, when I share what I went through to these friends, and they say, they call me, they think little about it. Just what they superficially heard on the news, and that's that. I don't want this event to be forgotten, because we have generations to come that we need to be concerned about. I think it's that serious, and thank you for taking it seriously, but we need to educate more people so that it is still there, out there in the consciousness of people, and they are aware of it. All of us are going through, and some of you much more so, every day. So, but before I leave tonight, I'd like to know if you have a date, for example.
It's July 16th at the middle school, at the same time, 5:30, as well as there.
I do want to address that real quick.
Go right ahead.
What you experienced is not insignificant by any means. It is a profound event that has occurred in this community and in Monterey County in general. And that is fully felt by every board member, not just supervisor. I do want to acknowledge that. The community of Pacaro is also still very much in the midst of recovering from their trauma from March 2023 and the flood events that they experienced. And so, I imagine that they are still fully involved in their own recovery and focusing on that. That's not to say that they don't deserve to know, and they absolutely do. We have provided them the same information that we have provided the rest of the District 2 area. They also received the reverse 911 phone calls about the health advisory. They did participate in the health survey, and I do believe the public health team did go out door to door in Pacaro to have people participate in the survey. So, District 2, I have never seen any district in this county experience so many significant multi-generational disasters within, I think, 365 days of each other. And so the rest of the world may move on, and that is natural, but we are not. I am not moving on from this. I am still very much in the thick of this and will likely be for a very long time, so long as Sonia will have me and the board will have me in this position. So you are not forgotten by any of the people here.
No, and I don't disagree with you about that. I'm just saying we need to educate more people in the general public.
In the state, in the country.
Yes.
Yes.
And
the world, absolutely. I 1,000% agree.
We're getting to the end here, but I had a few other people I definitely want to, I'll get to you next, but there's Wes and Kim and this gentleman, and I'll see what else we can take at that point. Wes, you have something?
Yeah, just trying to try to get a second. I want to switch subjects just a little bit, have it in there. Talking about people too poor to afford rent, or, no one's on this, maybe one could. But, passing the county resolution policy, like in January, and, Coalition Homeless Service Providers has a county resolution set. And between both of those, it's got a housing first approach. It's actually part of the CalICH, which is the California Community Council on Homelessness. housing and whatever kind of programs, and it's not legally required, but yet it's still one of the founding principles on the CalICH, which the county has implemented as policy. I want to know, like how's it going, what's the success rate, or what, encounters has the county had, and maybe in the states and CHPs here, have they even ever collaborated with each other? You know, is the state aware of the coalition, and does it coordinate with anything? You know, because people's belongings keep getting taken away, and it's their affordable housing. They're homeless, but they're not homeless, it's a community of folks who cannot afford rent. And they only become homeless when they get swept. I mean, the county comes by and state and says, you can't be here, they'll take everything you got to make sure that I don't see you somewhere else anytime soon.
Well, I don't think I have the information I can answer that at this point. I don't know if we have anybody here that, at this point. Can you?
Yeah, I can answer.
Okay, you can.
I'm Sonia LaRosa, County Administrative Officer for your county, Monterey, and previously worked homelessness in Fresno County for many years, but now work with Roxanne, who's in my office, but works with all districts, including all across D2. The coordination that was put in place was actually at the request not only of the Continuum of Care, but also Roxanne and her team, because we wanted to make sure that people were treated with dignity and respect and that their property was safeguarded. There's actually a process that occurs where our outreach team actually goes out and engages with folks to try to encourage them into housing, but if not, they do try to safeguard their property so that they're not losing critical documents that they might have on their person, including their identification, birth certificate, etc. Many of our services actually provide services to folks that are not staying in shelter in order to have them get their IDs, birth certificates if that's what they need. There's a lot of services that are still provided in the community, even for folks that do not come inside for whatever reason. Some of the encampment resolution grants, the ERG that you mentioned, we get those to be able to provide for housing for individuals to go into motels or motel rooms or hotel rooms in advance of them being placed into longer term housing. Again, some folks may choose to not go into that longer term housing for a range of reasons, but we're constantly exploring more encampment resolution grant dollars and also more home key projects that we're trying to save in order to provide longer term housing for folks. So we're constantly looking at that, Wes. So I know you probably have spoken with Roxanne before, and she's the gal that if there's something that we're doing where we're missing the mark, please let us know and we'll make sure we address it.
And what we're talking about is more for like larger encampments, you know, like identifiable 20, 30, 50 people. What about just the ones you see on the side of the road or whatever, you know, on county property, and just being like, hey, you know, you guys can't be here, does that happen?
So they are actually, even for the one person that might be under a bridge or next to the road, we will get calls. Roxanne receives calls at all hours, people staying in their cars, and they do engage with them to make sure that they're being offered resources as well. Not everybody comes inside, but the resources are offered. So that does happen, and it's not just on the larger encampments, it's on a one-on-one basis and working to our outreach team.
And I just want to notify, this is Sonia De La Rosa, she's the County Administrative Officer. She runs, makes sure the county works day to day, and nuts and bolts. And there isn't a better county administrative officer in the state, in my view. She came in and took office at a position there from outside the county, the same time I was elected. And she's doing a fantastic job and trying to correct a lot of those long-standing problems that some of you have brought up that haven't been addressed, to try to get things moving in that way. Kim, where did Kim go? She wandered off. Okay. I started this gentleman here in the cap who's been very patient.
I just want to follow along with the others who said, thank you so much for everything you've done for all of Sonora County. It goes way back, I came here in the fifties, and my mom worked on committees with your dad, so you follow in your dad's footsteps and doing that for the job. What I kind of gathered was, maybe first, young lady on the end there, you're on top of your game. It's been interesting to listen to what you had to say and how you've answered a lot of questions that other people have. And I think with all of this mess that it is, it's going to take a learning process for everybody. said, we came here in the mid-fifties. My dad came down the coast from a fishing boat in Lansing. So that's how we came here, many years ago. PG&E was up and started going, like somebody said earlier, the infrastructure was put in place. I mean, there was a big excitement, enthusiasm, big power plant. We can do some big things with this. And put out more power to the whole state. Consequently, the infrastructure was built. So what else would happen but for this new technology, these people in the battery business and PG&E to team up with them and figure out, let's use this infrastructure and let's send this power up the road. We unfortunately got it dumped in our lap. And this, to use your words, it's never happened. The ugliness of this has never happened. This is all new turf, this is new ground. I've lived here a long time. Never had the fires at PG&E until just the last couple, 3 years of this battery business. And now it's a new battle. Chief, I feel the real worst. I mean, if anybody needs to be watched and monitored and taken care of, there's some folks that have got some health issues that have been dumped in their front porch and on their property. Boy, I'll tell you what, you guys are right out in the middle of that. Bless their hearts. I mean, nobody knew how to handle it. So everybody kind of gathered together and worked with the best infrastructure that you have, the best game plan that you have, the way to contact people and tell them, hey, saddle up and get the hell out of town. You got a mess coming your way. Now we're going to figure out how to do the future. And we can beat it to death what happened yesterday. We just got to clean it up and put it back together. And what I gathered and what you said, Glenn, PUC is who the only people got to answer to. We can go over there and jump up and down to their front gate. We can stand out there with a bunch of signs and placards. Isn't it really good? You can go over there and shake your fist out. They're going to move on. They're going to continue doing what they're doing. And the only one they have to answer to technically is the PUC. If somehow or another we can sweet talk them into understanding what some of our needs are, if there could be something, the lady down here on the end made mention of, there's a lot of folks that didn't have wherewithal to do it, didn't have a place to go. We talked about the shelter in Castroville wasn't adequate enough. And now we gotta have figure out another game plan. If it ever happens again, how do we gather these people up and get a busing system going and move a bunch of folks? What about the people that live out here in this harbor on the boats? That was a tough one. So I'm wondering if we shouldn't put some emphasis on everybody getting in touch with the Public Utilities Commission. They need to be told. They need, we just can't send just you up there to talk to them all by yourself. Oh, we can, but I think we all want to get them to take a look at what's going on here. They need to pressure the utility system to abide by some serious rules so that this doesn't come down again.
It's a good point, to reach out like that, as well as to the state legislators and around anybody that you can onto that level. We're past 7. I don't want, I promised the Marine Labs would be finishing up here at 7. Don't want to wear out our welcome. If you have some other, some of you had your hands up, you have some other questions, but feel free to come up afterwards if we can. Talk to anybody here, talk to me. They're very much, good. But I want to just appreciate everybody for coming out here tonight, and thank you. And if you have any questions at all and you can't get addressed tonight, talking to us, please just send an email to my office. We'll respond to the best we can.
Can I ask one summary question? Just ask, what should we be worried about now that we've been taking all this information in? What do you advise us to worry about?
I don't know what the answer to that one. I think what you're, the issue, everything's raised as an issue that you're concerned about is valid and things to worry on about. We've got a cleanup that's going to be going on. I think the thing is to, hope we don't have another fire in the meantime, is one thing. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There was one last, to end on, good point. I'm sorry, Tom, go ahead.